Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started.
We gotta wait for Brandon to. Brandon's gonna come back and start the cameras. Give me 1 second.
Okay, just another minute. We'll get going in just 1 minute.
I'll introduce you.
You gonna make your announcement?
Yeah. Let's just say. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to meeting 4 of the Deer Park Middle School Boundary Study. All committee members are asked to sign in on the sign-in sheets at our front, as well as any observers that may be joining us this evening. In the event of an emergency, the fire alarm sounding, please note your exits. Best exit is back the way we came in on the parking lot side door. There are also exits to the front and to the side. We are going to ask committee members, if you need to speak again this evening, please come up to the microphones so that we are live streaming, and make sure that we capture all the audio for our folks joining us at home. COVID mitigations in effect. Mask use is optional at this time. We do have masks available should anyone desire. There is hand sanitizer available at each table, and we ask that everyone please respect each other's personal decisions on masking and personal space. If any of you should find yourselves in result of a positive COVID test, please report that to Mr. Mike Godfredson, the one who sends you your emails about attendance. All meeting materials will be posted on the website after meeting tomorrow. And feedback forms are on your, we have feedback forms should there be any additional questions this evening for us to take back, as well as feedback forms available to the public on our website. With that, I give you over to Mr. Matt Cropper to get us started this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you all for coming back. Hope you guys had a happy Thanksgiving. Got plenty to eat and got to spend some time with family and things. But here we are back at our 4th meeting for this boundary study. James couldn't be with us here tonight. He's not feeling well, so I'm covering this one on my own. Our objectives for tonight are to review some survey results. We've gone over, we had a survey that accompanied the public information session last time, and you have that in your packet. Some of the comments and the survey results are in the back of your packet. Everybody should have picked up a packet over at your sign-in table, and so that some of the survey data is in there. We've got some updated information. We developed another option, option D, which basically incorporates a lot of things. It's an evolution of some of the 3 options that we started with, and it also incorporates some of the new information we're seeing with current enrollment. So we'll talk about that here in a little bit and let you guys get some time to look over the option D, and then that's really the agenda tonight. If you guys feel like you're ready to vote on a recommendation tonight, we are prepared to enable you guys to do that if you feel like you're ready to vote on a recommendation this evening. But we'll see how that goes and see how you feel after looking through the materials. So here we are, 4th meeting. Like I said, we do have another meeting scheduled on December 14th. If you do decide to vote tonight, we will not have to ask you to come out to this meeting, but we'll just play this by ear and see how the night goes. Just a little bit of a recap. We're working on a boundary change study that's supposed to come into be implemented in effect next fall. Middle schools is the sole focus here. We've got the middle schools shown on the map that are a part of this effort, and those that could be impacted and listed here on the table. Deer Park Middle School is the primary one that the focus that needs some more immediate relief, but the other schools are also in play. So we are tasked to accomplish the following objectives: reduce overcrowding at Deer Park Middle Magnet School, create these boundaries that effectively use capacity in all participating schools and make them as equitable as possible, looking at the neighbors and how they're being used and how much space they have, and maintain or increase the diversity among participating schools to reflect the diversity of the region and the school system. Some updates since last meeting. There was some talk and questions about enrollment and how enrollment fluctuates from over time throughout the school year. And the comment was the September 30th enrollment's usually lower and enrollment spikes after that. What the Office of Strategic Planning has put together is something, and this is at the very end of your packet. It's pretty fascinating data. It shows the September 30th enrollment as this first bar, and then it shows these marking periods, which are basically like the quarters. So this MP1 is the first quarter. It's not long after September 30. And then you've got the second quarter, third, and fourth quarter. And if you look at these, you could see that some of the phenomenon that happens is you've got your September 30 enrollment, and then you're right. There is a spike right immediately after the September 30 enrollment count happens. But then as time goes on and the year progresses, that enrollment starts to level back off. And if you look at the tables from school to school, most of them follow the same trend in that the September 30th bar gets somewhat close or larger than the final quarter bar. And so this is one of the reasons why September 30 enrollment is the primary enrollment date that we use. It's the same point in time, and it's the basis for a lot of other decisions that this district makes regarding funding and things like that. But this is something that gives you a good idea on how enrollment fluctuates over time and how it has historically, to give you kind of some perspective on that based off of some of the comments and concerns that you have had about fluctuating enrollment. So we do have some preliminary September 30, 22 data, and this is also interesting information. So you'll see here that we have the 21, which is what we've been working with, building options up to this date, 2021 enrollment data. We've got the 2022 enrollment data here next to it. And as you can see, Deer Park had a deficit of 331 seats. They were 126% utilized last year. This year, they're not as bad. And I think people have mentioned that in meetings, in that the enrollment at Deer Park has gone down. It's still 109%, but they're not 331 over, they're 117 over right now. So you have to be kind of careful with leaning too heavily on 1 year of data, but this can be suggestive of a trend that's maybe leveling off a little bit, and maybe there may not be a necessary need to move as many students out of Deer Park. Did you want to make a comment? Could you come up to? Okay, here, let me see. I'm sorry. Okay. Okay, so the question was, are we counting trailers or the portable buildings as part of the capacity? And that the modulars and portables are not counted in this capacity number. So yeah, we understand that. Yeah, and that's how Deer Park is able to operate at 126%, because there's modulars and portables out there. The focus is trying to get these students into the bricks and mortar building, and so that they don't have to rely on trailers. And that's really the crux of some of the work that we're doing, is trying to not be reliant on portable buildings. And but we're looking at capacity, permanent capacity only, and not factoring in those modular portable classrooms. So the enrollment has changed from building to building. Some of them have remained relatively stable. Pikesville is, getting a little bit. It's 101. It was 100 now, and then Windsor Mill has gone down a little bit. So enrollment has relatively gone down in this area, and so we use some of this data to help with to help kind of inform us as we developed a draft option D for your review tonight, as well as other input that you guys have provided us up to date. So so this is something that's important to know, to compare the 21 versus 22, and the takeaway with this is that Deer Park is still overcrowded, but maybe not as severe as it was when we first started this effort. And so we have not updated the planning block numbers and so the demographic statistics. Those are still using 21 data because that data is still preliminary. But we provided this, and we've done some estimates on the options using 22 to kind of give you a sense of what the numbers would look like. So these are the series of options we have right now. We have not changed A, B, and C. These are the original options that we presented to the public at the last meeting. But these are the options that we've retrofitted the 22 data into these numbers so that you could see how they look now with the current enrollment. And then we have an option D, which is kind of unfortunate here. Let me shuffle this. Well, it doesn't, it's not, the ends are cut off on this, but if you look at your table in your packet, you'll see option D is over here, and the boundary or the utilization percentages for option D are much more balanced, that incorporates that 22 enrollment data. So D was a modified, refined option built from A, which takes into account public input and this new enrollment data. D is sort of an evolution of the first three options. It significantly decreases the number of impacted students as the fall enrollment shows that Deer Park doesn't need as much relief. And these are basically where we are right now with these four options. So we had a public information session, as you all know, back in October to gather some feedback from the public, invited them to come look at maps and talk with them, and gave them a presentation. And we had a survey that was live all the way up to November 14th, and you've got that information in your packet. We had 121 total respondents to the online survey, and they provided a variety of input and opinions related to the options A, B, and C, which were the ones that were being presented at that time. So one of the things I always like to remind committee members is you've got a lot of different data points in your packet, in your handout. The survey information is really just, consider it another piece of data. Don't rely solely on the survey data as a basis for what you think is best. It shouldn't be used as a sole basis for determining what the recommendation would be. It's just really feedback and input that parents are providing based off of where they live and how they feel about the boundaries. But you really need to stay focused on the objectives and our criteria, and the best plan will be one that adheres to that as best as possible. So here's option A, just a summary of what the public had given us, and you could see sometimes we have big pie pieces either a lot of people like one option and they dislike another one. My takeaway and the public input from these various options looks pretty balanced. You see the pie chart looks relatively evenly sized, and so I didn't see anything that was a clear favorite from the public in terms of input related to the options. But option A had 33.9% either vote strongly or somewhat in favor, and they had 33.9% also voted somewhat opposed or strongly opposed. So, and then there was a lot of those who were just neutral toward this option. Option B had 24% of respondents vote strongly in favor and somewhat in favor, and B had 33.9% that were somewhat opposed, and then 42% neutral. They were somewhat or strongly opposed. So A had more favor overall than B. And then C had 29.8% strongly in favor or somewhat in favor, and 27% said they were somewhat or strongly opposed, and 40% were neutral. So A had the greatest number that were in favor or strongly in favor. They also had a high amount that were opposed. So, take this for what it is. Look at the input. We try to glean feedback from the comments to see if there's something that can drive constructive change to the maps and boundaries. And we've studied these boundaries. Yes, ma'am. Could you talk to the mic by chance? Yes, ma'am. Here, let's see.
My question is about the sample size of the survey. And so I guess, could you give some general information in terms of how many respondents, and was it a good mix of all of the schools that have attendance at these? I just wanted to see if there were any kind of like outliers or any bias involved with the data that's presented.
Yes. So we had 121 people respond to the survey. If you look at your packet and near the back, there's a survey report. And on page 1 of the survey report, it gives you the number of total respondents by middle school on page 1 of the survey. And so we did have a good number of respondents from every area. Deer Park had the greatest number at 51, which should be expected because they are mostly impacted the most. Franklin had 16. Northwest had 19, Pikesville had 21, and then Windsor Mill had 7. And I can understand Windsor Mill because they haven't really been in play much up to now as we move boundaries around.
Thank you. Was any other demographic data collected? For example, of the respondents that answered, how many were 8th grade parents versus 6th grade parents?
We did not ask that, but I could take that into consideration for future surveys. We did not ask what grade level their child was.
Yes, and then did you capture how many of those parents that answered had children in the ESOL program or other specialized programs?
We did not ask that either.
I think that those things kind of matter. So for example, if I'm an 8th grade parent and my child's not going to be there next year, I may say neutral, right? But if my child was in the 6th grade, I might have, answered a different way. And then not having additional information on how my child will be impacted if I'm in a specialized program and I go to a school that has specialty programs, there would just be some unanswered questions. And so I might also vote neutral. I might disagree without having all the information.
Mm-hmm. Well, I appreciate that. I think that's good input and suggestions. We haven't heard that before, that suggestion, and I think that's something that's, a good suggestion to consider. We had 121 respondents, and so I would encourage you to look at the comments, some of the comments that were provided, along with their surveyed questions that they asked, and you'll see. I've seen it looks a lot like what we normally see. Just different opinions and thoughts about the options. Some good things and some constructive things. But again, I would again caution you not to lean heavily on this as the final determinant for basing your recommendation. You need to think big picture on what's best for all children. Parents, and the natural thing for parents to comment based off of what they feel is best for their community or their student or their school. And not always the case, but usually that's what we see. So you guys have a tougher task of being more objective and focusing on what's best for all kids in this recommendation. So the primary reasons for supporting options were to address current overcrowding. The majority of people who supported the options voted, they said it was because it addresses the current overcrowding. And you could see there's different distribution of different thoughts and opinions, but addressing the current overcrowding is the was the dominant reason for providing that input. So the primary concern for people who opposed an option was it does not address current overcrowding. A lot of people said, who opposed it, said it wasn't enough to relief to schools. And so, you have kind of two polar opposite opinions that are showing up in some of the data that we've collected from the input from the survey. So, like I said, we have the same three options, A, B, and C, and then we have this new option D. There are large plot maps of option D at each station, as well as options in your packet. All the statistics and handout letter size maps are inside your packet. Do you have a question?
I don't want to hold up the process, but I think we have 2 hours. I have 2 questions.
Okay.
First question is, how will the community have an opportunity to comment on option D without the survey? And for me, I think some of us is the first time looking at option D. And my comment is, it feels very similar. Thank you. And my comment is, it feels very similar to the very first option, the very first map, that it was my understanding that it was not an option initially. So my question is, can you tell me what has changed? And as we look at these enrollment numbers, I know this is probably above your head, but what safeguards are being put in place where Deer Park and the schools will be able to stay at the projected enrollment? Mm-hmm. Otherwise, we could have 300 students again.
Okay, so
Thank you for your
yes,
patience.
ma'am. So your first question that didn't catch the mic was how will parents know about option D, since it is a new map and it wasn't shared at the public information session? How can we ensure that parents will benefit from be informed on an option D? And if you look at option D was an evolution, a build off of option A. And so other areas were expanded, but it was built off of the option A. And option A was looked at because it was one that the public had told, most of the public had told us that they liked that one. That was the one that they felt was best. And so tonight you have the opportunity to look at option D and make changes to that. We don't have to, if the committee feels like you don't want to vote tonight, we can give more time and give time for the public to evaluate this before the December 14th meeting. If you do choose to vote tonight, there still is time between the recommendation being made and all this is made public and the board presentation that's coming up next year. So there will be time for additional input to be received and considered as before the board chooses a plan to vote on. And so you asked about what are the changes with D, and so we'll talk a little bit about that and look at that here in a minute. I'll show you some of the nuances with option D and that differ from some of the other maps. So we also have our interactive map that has the maps live on there. Option D is on there. And then all of this information is available on the BCPS webpage for public members to download and review as well. So all this information is available to the general public. And in addition to the large maps, you've got your 8.5 by 11 maps in your packets. So let's just take another recap on these options. So this is option A. And if you look at option A, Deer Park Middle Magnet gets relief around 99%. This impacts the second least number of students of all options, 330. There is no impact to the middle school to high school feeder patterns, and all students can walk in their walk zones. This maintains in all options. This does have 9 feeder pattern splits from elementary to middle, compared to currently there's 5 feeder pattern splits, although they are relatively balanced. So when you look at option A, you could see that we shaved off some of the northern part of Deer Park to go to Franklin, and then this area down here out of Deer Park to Northwest, and this is Owings Mills Boulevard. And so this is the map that that's option A. So really this area in the north and this area down here are the two areas that are being impacted in option A. If you look at option B, it's very similar. We've expanded this a little bit, and then this area still remains. So this also gives Deer Park the relief down to 98%. Feeder pattern splits are not impacted for middle to high school, and everyone who's in a walk zone is still there. This still has 9 feeder pattern splits like the other one, compared to currently the 5 feeder pattern splits from elementary to middle. And this one impacts the second most at 343. The first one was 330, so 13 more students, 330 to 343. I'm going to go to C now, and these are all the options that the committee had developed, and as we deliberated in getting to this public information session, you can see this one moves some different area here and up in here from Deer Park to Franklin. And then down here, the same area gets fed from Deer Park to Northwest. This takes Deer Park to 97%. Again, the middle of high school feeders aren't impacted, and walk zones aren't impacted. And then we do still go from 5 to 9 feeder pattern splits. So this exists in all of these options that we've looked at so far. And this impacts 4 more kids, or 3 more at 347. They're all relatively moving around the same number of students in these first 3 options. So here's option D. So option D still takes area from Deer Park to Franklin. This is an area right here that was moved from Pikesville to Franklin. It's a small number of students, and it's really done more to align feeder patterns to try to avoid a small feeder pattern split. I think there's only 2 kids in this area, so it's not very impactful. What we've done in D as well is, because we were looking at these 22 numbers and adjusting and taking fewer students out of Deer Park, but then we were also looking at Pikesville, because Pikesville is kind of ticking up to the upward trend. And so what we did here is we backed off of Owings Mills Boulevard here and didn't take it all the way to Owings Mills. From Deer Park to Northwest, still moving a good number of students to give Deer Park the relief they need. But then we also moved an area right here in this section from Pikesville to Northwest. There's already some area on the other side of the highway that goes to Northwest, and this is just an additional area that's being sent to Northwest from Pikesville. And when you look at the maps, you can see how many kids there are. We're interested in hearing your take on that. If it's something that you feel isn't necessary and you don't want to move those, you can always give us guidance to undo that. And if you don't feel like Pikesville needs that relief. But this takes Deer Park to 92% when factoring the 22 enrollment numbers. This one does impact a substantially fewer number of students, 240, versus the other ones were 330 to 347. So about almost 100 fewer students are moved as a result of this. Elementary and middle feeder patterns and walk zones aren't impacted like all of them. And this one does have the 11 current splits from middle to high school. This one brings that up to 13. And so there's feeder pattern split data. I did notice that some of the other splits for option D looked the same as what they currently are. And so that was some benefits in the splits with this particular map. So there's the additional areas that we're looking at are this area up here, and then this area right here are the 2 areas that were added to consideration as we developed option D. And we backed off Owings Mills, and that brought the impacts down because there are a lot of students along Owings Mills Boulevard here. Does anybody have any questions about that? Yes, ma'am. Let me get you a microphone here. Okay, that's okay. You can ask as many as you want.
So I'm still confused about this. How do we get from 5 feeder pattern schools to 13 split? And if you could help me understand the difference, because I'm not necessarily involved in that.
Sure, sure. Let me get my handout real quick. So I'm going to go to the handout, and I'm going to go to our stats pages here. And if you go to the back here, feeder pattern splits are shown on page 6 of the handout. So page 6 shows the current splits from elementary to middle and middle to high. So there are currently 5 schools are split from elementary to middle. There are 5 splits that exist from elementary to middle and 11 that exist from middle to high school currently, before we did any work. If you go to the next page, you can look at, on page 7, you can see there's a breakdown of the number of splits. So that 5 splits currently, A, B, and C split 9, go up to 9. So there's additional splits that are developed. And the D option remains at 5. There's no net increase in the number of splits. This will show you also where the schools and what percentage of schools are split. Another thing to keep in mind is that there is an upcoming elementary boundary process that in the somewhat future, and that's likely going to enable us to look at other adjustments to splits, try to refine them even more potentially. And then if you look on page 8, that's the elementary to middle. Okay, and then page 9 is where you can see there's currently 11 splits from middle to high school, and this creates an additional two additional splits. And so I'd have to find, I know Deer Park gets an additional split in this to Randallstown. And remember, we're only making adjustments to middle school and not elementary or high school. So sometimes our hands are somewhat tied on what we can do to try to fine tune these splits. And then if you look at, let's see, let me find some more. Northwest Academy does get another split that gets created as a result of this. So that's where you see the additional splits that get picked up. Deer Park gets another one. Northwest Academy gets another one as a result of this split, of this option. Any other questions or comments? Anybody want to make any comments or questions before we let you guys get into some small group work and dive into option D and talk about it? So what we'd like you to do is work within your small groups, look at the survey results, give you some time to study those and just kind of scan through the comments. Just think about the pros and cons of each option. And the principals can help act as facilitators and maybe help record input that's being provided. You can feel free to mark up the maps. You could circle areas that if you feel like an area should be added or undone to the option D, that's certainly things that we encourage you to do and mark on the maps and put your notes on these maps for us. And we're going to give you a good amount of time and then we'll reconvene when you guys are ready. So yeah, I think we've covered all of this. So we'll go ahead and let you guys get to work, and I'll be walking around helping answer any questions you have. guys think? What do you guys think of that? Okay, before it's hearing people like creating little straw polls amongst themselves about voting and things like that, and that's perfectly fine. But we don't want to put the cart before the horse. I'd like to make sure that we get everybody can benefit some of your thoughts and conversations that you're having about the map. So before we decide to vote, I'd like to have each group or whoever feels compelled to do so come up to the mic and just tell us some of your thoughts about what you talked about, maybe option D or some of the other information, the survey data. Anything you want to say? Does anybody want to provide any input based off of some of your thoughts and conversations? Would you guys, somebody from this group, do you guys have any thoughts you want to share? Could you come up to the mic? The media would love to. Oh, you can't? Okay. Let me get you a mic. No problem. Here you go.
Yes, I promised before that was my next to the last question a minute ago. So this is my last comment. Number one, I still have some concerns about option D not being presented to the entire group. With all due respect, I know there's been a lot of work done to make it as equitable as possible, and we don't necessarily need to send it out again. I think a lot of research, a lot of conversation has happened. I just wanted to get that on the record. The second piece that I want to share is what some of the comments have already borne out. There's no good solution. And the only positive solution needs to be another middle school in the Northwest area. So we hope that is on folks' radar. Thank you.
Okay, yes, ma'am. Anybody else want to provide any comments or thoughts? Ways you may be leaning, your thoughts about the options or anything like that? All right. Well, we're waiting on the technology here, but that's okay. Give us a minute to get everything lined up. Give me 1 second. I'll be right back. Okay, so just before I know I got the vibe from the group that you guys would like to vote tonight. But before we do that, I don't want to assume that everybody is of the same opinion that we are ready to vote tonight as a committee. So maybe what we could just do is, could I get a show of hands if you feel like you're ready to vote on a recommendation to present to the board tonight? If you're ready to recommend a vote, an option tonight via a vote, raise your hand. Okay, and
Qualify that.
Okay, we have the active votes? Okay.
We do, but to qualify that, if you keep your hands up, with the any only voting members, please raise your hands, because of course principals do not have the capacity to vote.
Okay. And if you do not want to vote tonight and you want to go to another meeting for the next meeting to finalize your vote at the next meeting, raise your hand. Okay. So it seems that we have a unanimous. The group is ready to vote tonight on a recommendation. So we just wanted to make sure that that was clear and that we weren't assuming anything and people weren't speaking up about it. So if there aren't any other comments or questions about the options, I think you guys are ready to cast your vote on a recommendation. Okay. We can do that. We could start there and go backwards.
Yeah, and for the record, we have 13 total members here tonight. Looks like we have 8 voting members. Is that correct, Mike? Let's be certain. Raise your hand if you have a device, please. 1, 2, 3, 4,
9.
5, 6, 7, 8.
9. I count 9.
9. Okay. Very good. 9.
Okay. Okay. So we're going to go through the series of options just to. Okay. Let's just go. Let's start at the top. Start at A, and we're basically going to, just for the record, make sure that we're thorough with this. So we want, if everybody has your clicker. And if you want to recommend option A to the Board of Education, click A to recommend it, and B if you do not want to recommend option A. So you'll click A if you do want to take A to the board, and B if you do not want to take option A to the board for a recommendation. Still need 4. Okay. Okay, so we have 1 yes, and then the remaining are no. And so this option, option A, will not go to the board for a recommendation. Option B. If you feel option B should be the recommended plan to take to the board for a recommendation, if you want option B, click A. If you do not want option B, click B. Okay, that is unanimous. Nobody felt option B was to be recommended to the board. Okay, option C. If you want to bring option C to the board for recommendation, click A. If you do not want to take option C to the board for recommendation, click B. Okay. Okay. So that's a unanimous, not unanimous, but majority said no. Okay. And then the last one, option D. If you want to take option D to the board as a recommendation for this boundary change, click A. If you do not want to take option D to the board, click B. Okay. Okay, so we have 100% unanimous decision from the committee to recommend option D to the board. So that's pretty definitive. Could we go back to the PowerPoint, Mike? So I think I don't think that will be the option that we take to the board for their recommendation. Since you voted tonight, we will not have the next committee meeting on in mid-December. 14th, so that's not going to happen. I'm just going to go right back real quick. Let's see here. Let me go to the timeline real quick since we're not coming to the last meeting, just to recap on that for everybody's benefit. Okay. So we will be presenting the recommendation to the board on February 14th next year at the Greenwood Building at 6:30 p.m. We would encourage you guys to go to be there for that, but your work is really done after tonight. It's not mandatory, and we really appreciate all the time that you guys have put in and deliberating these maps and helping us out and making an informed decision recommendation to the board. It will be presented to the board in February, and the board is expected to have a hearing on March 1st here at the Newtown High School auditorium about this, so you can tell people who want to know about the recommendation, who want to speak their opinions about the recommendation of the board. They can go at that meeting and they can speak directly to the board at that public hearing. And then the board is expected to make a vote on March 14th, 2023 on this boundary plan. And nothing's final until they approve a plan, but we will be delivering your recommendations and telling the story how we led to this recommendation on your behalf. So anything else that we need?
And just as a further final note, of course, despite there being one recommendation, the board has access to all the materials on the website. The website has all the recordings of every meeting. It has all the materials that have been presented at every meeting. It has all the markups to any map that any committee member made. All those and all the survey comments and community feedback. All of that is available as part of the public record that's on the website.
For the board's benefit, yes. Did you have a question or comment? Okay.
Thank you. If there are significant changes to any of these boundary areas, any additional information that's received regarding planning for the area, will the committee then have to come back together to, if something is going to impact this decision greatly, will we come back together to, because it's, between now and February, and I know the change and different changes that are happening within county government, I just don't know what that looks like.
It's historically, we haven't had to do that. There's fluctuations that happen from month to month and things like that, and changes in just the different elements of schools. We have not had to do that, but not to say that it's not possible, but we don't anticipate having to regroup. We do expect that this phase of the work is your phase with the committee's work. Now that you've made a recommendation, you've done all this thorough research, and the board really appreciates this, it's in their hands once we deliver that recommendation. And then they have the ability to make changes to the map. So if something, if they identify something that they feel needs to be adjusted, they will be looking at that potentially. They don't usually do a lot of extensive adjustments because they honor the work that you guys have done, and they don't, honestly, they probably don't know nearly as much detail about this area and this study as you do, since you've been spending so many hours on it. But it's never say never, but I don't anticipate the committee needing to regroup again until the board, it's the board's hands now after this. Okay, well, I think we're going to let you guys go home. Thank you so much. Hope you guys have a happy holiday, and thank you for all your hard work.
On behalf of the Office of Strategic Planning and BCPS, thank you all. It was great. Great job.
Good job, guys. Thank you very much.